Hey, everybody, welcome into the podcast. We are back with another special bonus episode.
Bracket episode.
That's right, man. This is my favorite time of every season, Brad. It is truly the most wonderful time of the year.
It really is, man. Listening to you just fall into histrionics over my better picks and better opinions than yours, it's just music to my ears.
You know what's really funny, Brad, is like I feel like we are going to give everybody what they came for today. Because when it comes to opinions and takes, I feel like that it reaches its apex with the bracket challenge every season. And the funny thing is that you and I think, have been pretty much on the same wavelength with most of the movies we've done this season. I think we're in a really good groove of kind of breaking down these movies and analyzing them. We haven't really fought over any hot takes this whole season. And I think that just knowing how the bracket episodes go, we'll probably get there today.
Yeah, honestly, I think another thing that I love about doing these brackets is just simply the fact that it calls me back to a lot of the movies we did early in the season that I kind of like forgot about a little bit. Like thinking back on The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, I was just like, holy crap, like, A, it feels like a year ago that I watched that. B, it felt like it took a year for you to get me the right version of the movie. And C, it was a really good movie, man. I need to go back and watch it again.
Yeah, man, I actually just found out there's a art museum in Cleveland that has a thing called the Cleveland Cinematheque, and they're showing a 4K restored version of this on the big screen at the end of the month. So I'm thinking about going. If you want to make it up to Cleveland, we'll go see The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly together.
Man, I would love to do that. Let's look at some dates.
Let's plan on it.
Aw.
Oh. All right, so if you are new to the podcast, if you've never heard us do one of these bracket episodes before, the way it works is we divide our podcast into seasons. And the seasons are, we do 32 movie reviews, and then at the end of those 32 weeks, we put all those movies into a madness-style bracket, and we pick one winner of each season. The way the bracket is laid out is like this. We have assigned scores to all these movies at the end of every episode we did. And so we have a pretty, rudimentary ranking of these movies at the end of the season. But then Brad and I each just kind of look over the list of 32 movies that we've gone through, and we just kind of go with our gut and our heart, and we each do an individual ranking. Like, regardless of whatever score we gave it when we reviewed it, now at the end of the season, how would I rank these movies? With the criteria being that every movie that isn't the winner goes into the fiery furnace and is never heard from again. So our criteria is always going to be which of these two movies in a head-to-head matchup deserves to exist more than the other. And based on those rankings, we take Brad's list, my list, and then the scores from each movie, and we kind of come up with an aggregate that we seed out this 32 seed bracket with. Brad, I got to tell you, man, of all the seasons we've done so far, this was by far the hardest one for me to rank all these movies. I don't know if you had the same thing, but it was a challenge for me.
Yeah, dude, I sat down with this list and I pretty quickly had like a top 4 that in my mind separated itself from the rest of the pack. But then honestly, like from number 5 to like number 24, number 25, I had the hardest time trying to come up with a ranking. Because there was a movie where I'd like put it, let's just say I slotted at number 12, and then I would look at the movie I had at like number 20, and I'd be like, ooh, do I like that better than the movie I have at 12? I was like, I don't know, but I don't think I should drop 12 all the way down to 21
it's a really
or raise
slim
20 up to 12. Like, I didn't know what to do, man. It was crazy.
Yeah, the margins were razor thin on this one. And I noticed it too when I was looking through all the scores we gave. I would venture to say that we gave, on average, the highest scores to movies all season. Like, I got down to the 17th or 18th movie on the list before we had one, when I rank ordered them, that we hadn't given a 9 out of 10 or higher to. So I look at our seating here in this bracket, and there are some really exceptional movies, that are like number 20 overall or whatever the number might be. And it seems weird to see it that way. But at the same time, I mean, my lowest rated movie of the season, I still gave a 7 to. Like, I didn't dislike any movies this season. So this is really going to be a hard one for me, Brad.
See, now you've got me curious. I'm curious of what my lowest score given was.
Oh, I don't know. Probably like a 6, 5.5 or 6. I'm sure there was one that you didn't care. I know you didn't like All About Eve that much, but you still gave that one like a 6, I think. And that might have been your lowest score.
Yeah, I gave All About Eve a 6.5, and I did not like that movie.
Well, I'm sure it'll come up here in one of our matchups.
It was no Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, but
what can be, right?
but what can be? No movie like it.
All right, Brad, before we jump into eliminating some movies here, we're going to start with this round of 32, but we have whiskeys to drink as we do it today, and we're going to be highlighting a brand called Barrel Whiskey today. If you've been following bourbon for the last few years, you've probably heard of Barrel. They are like a premier brand now in the bourbon and now rye world. Brad, they started back in 2012, and they were one of the first ones to kind of unapologetically, transparently say, hey, we don't make the whiskey, we source the whiskey, and we blend the whiskey. And we are going to pride ourselves on having the best blends of whiskey we possibly can. And you know what? They have really made a name for themselves doing that. I think every one that we're going to try today, Brad, which is one of their batches of bourbon, one of their batches of rye, and then a finished bourbon as well, they all won either gold or double gold at the most recent San Francisco World Spirits competition. Barrel is absolutely knocking it out of the park, and I cannot wait to try that. But we'll get there in a minute. Brad, it is time for us to get going on this bracket. Any final thoughts before we dive in, Brad?
I hope that the podcast continues on after this.
Yeah, I will say, I try to keep my composure, like when you have differing opinions from me on episodes, but I like really and truly, there is something that like viscerally responds to you when you knock one of my favorite movies out of existence on this. Like, it is a dumb little game we're playing here, and I'm still like, I don't know that I ever get more upset than when I lose a head-to-head matchup and a movie that I love has to get thrown in the furnace.
Yeah, I will say, I don't know if there's any movies quite like that in this season. Like, for as many great movies we watched, I can't think of any. Oh, maybe Meet Me in St. Louis that you have like weird attachments to.
Yeah.
And you won't let go of.
Other
than Meet Me in St. Louis, what would you say?
I think a lot of these movies are like weird attachment movies for me that I kind of held back on until season 4 because I guess I just didn't want to introduce them to the podcast too early. I think that we have really hit our stride when we look at these movies. And now that you have 150 movies or whatever it is under your belt, you are more appreciative of a Bob movie at this point. Like, you can identify a movie and be like, yeah, I bet Bob likes this movie.
Like, oh, there's father issues?
Yeah.
Bob loves it.
I mean, it's true. True.
If Spielberg can have that issue, you can have it too. But I will say as a disclaimer, Bob, I know that you have a great relationship with your father. It's more of the idea of fatherhood that just connects to you deeply for some reason.
And it always has. Yeah. So anyway, I'm sure that you will find out which ones I'm weirdly connected to as they get picked off one by one here in the bracket. And that means it's time for us to start. We're going to jump right in. For those of you who are following along with the upper left kind of quadrant here in the bracket, and we're starting out with the number 1 overall seed, which is The Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, going up against the number 32 overall seed, Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. Brad, we have 2 huge franchises facing off here, just some significant IP, and franchises that are near and dear to both of our hearts. But I think what we're catching here is probably the best Lord of the Rings movie up against what is definitely, in my opinion, the worst Harry Potter movie.
Yeah, and to be fair, I did not expect Order of the Phoenix to be our 32nd ranked movie, but it doesn't totally surprise me. And honestly, I think any of the 3 Lord of the Rings is better probably than any of the Harry Potter movies. And that's no knock on the Harry Potter franchise. I think the Harry Potter franchise is fantastic. But yeah, I would take Return of the King over any of them, and Return of the King is probably the weakest entry. So yeah, easy move on here for the Two Towers.
All right, no arguments yet. We have already put one into the Sweet 16, which is The Two Towers. And that takes us to our second matchup. Now, Brad, this is where we're already starting to get into movies that are near and dear to my heart. We are talking about the number 16 overall seed, Children of Men, up against the 17th seed, High Noon. Brad, I flat out love both of these movies. This is a really hard one for me. I have a feeling it's not going to be as hard for you. You liked Children of Men, but you were certainly much, much cooler on it than I am. And so I'm interested to hear, are you moving High Noon on, and what's your reasoning there?
You know, I really, really loved High Noon. I think that there is something about that movie. The way that Gary Cooper carries himself has become iconic in so many different ways, that the stoic, fearless leader who will not back down from evil, he's not going to call attention to himself. There's just something about that was beautiful and evocative, and I really loved it. But I'm actually going to move Children of Men on. I really liked Children of Men. I think that it's an example of sci-fi done well. The movie uses violence really well for effect. I really liked Children of Men. Honestly, looking back, I think I gave High Noon a 9 and Children of Men an 8.5. And so they're both in a pretty similar spot, but I think I'd move Children of Men on over High Noon.
Oh, man. I feel like the most proud parent right now. Like, I feel like I finally coaxed some love for a movie out of you that I was not anticipating you loving. I'm going to give myself all the credit here. I don't know if you're hearing this, but I'm getting the credit here.
I really want to make a joke about, like, I just said all that to get you to feel proud and then actually say, no, we're moving High Noon on. But no, I genuinely want to move Children of Men on. It's a great movie, dude.
All right.
I liked it a lot. Aside from, it is one of the greatest movies with really bad acting.
And if you'd like to hear more about it, I think we just did it 2 weeks ago. So just scroll down a couple episodes and you'll find it right there.
That's right.
All right.
Can't let you get away with too much there, Bob.
Children of Men moves on into the round of 16, and that means it's time for our third matchup. The number 9 overall seed, Schindler's List, up against the 24 seed, The Royal Tenenbaums. I don't know if we could have matched up two more wildly different movies if we tried, Brad. And let me say this up front. I love The Royal Tenenbaums. I think I have a more deep personal attachment to The Royal Tenenbaums. I think it speaks to me in a way, that Schindler's List doesn't, just because Schindler's List is more of an exploration of a moment in history that I was not around for, even though it has very universal human themes. I pretty easily moved Schindler's List on to the next round here. But I will say as a disclaimer, in doing my ranking for this, Brad, I think that I'm going to be a little bit cooler on Schindler's List than you might be expecting. And we kind of talked about this a little bit during the episode. I think it's an incredible movie. I think it's an important movie that everyone should see. But the more that we have gone back and looked at some of Spielberg's other works, I don't know if it's Spielberg's greatest achievement as a director, and I definitely don't think it's Spielberg's best movie. So Schindler's List moves on from this round for me really easily, but I think it's in a more vulnerable spot than maybe you might have expected it to be for me.
Yeah, Bob, I looked through your list of rankings and I was shocked to see how low you had put Schindler's List. For me, it's a top 10 movie for me, and so it's an
like
easy,
of the season or ever?
Of ever.
Oh wow, okay.
I think it is a brilliantly phenomenal movie that's powerful, and you said it as well. It needs to be seen by everyone. And so yeah, I'm easily moving Schindler on as well. He's on my list.
Oh, that was groan worthy, man. Any last thoughts on Royal Tenenbaums before we send it off into the abyss?
Probably one of the most quirky movies we've sent into the abyss.
Mm-hmm. Now that you've had some, I was gonna say, now that you've had some time to like sit with it, marinate on it, where are you? Yeah. Like, are you pro Wes Anderson?
Yeah, like I said, I left that episode saying that at the very least, Royal Tenenbaums intrigued me to watch more of Wes Anderson. And I think I'm in the same spot. I'd like to go back to Royal Tenenbaums at some point. I want to get onto Darjeeling, Grand Budapest. I'm genuinely interested.
All right, Brad. Schindler's List is moving on to the round of 16, and that brings us to our fourth matchup of the day. This is the number...
Do you want me to flip the coin just right now?
I kind of do, yeah. The number 8 seed, Monty Python and the Holy Grail, up against the number 25 seed, Almost Famous. Now, Brad did not like Almost Famous, and I was really shocked. And I think listening back to that episode this week, I think you were a little swayed by our friend Perry Ritter, who for some reason went way harder on that movie than he needed to go. I thought Perry was a big fan of the movie. Turns out I was being duped by both of you. I felt very ganged up on in that episode. Brad, I was just listening to a podcast this week where they interviewed the actor Billy Crudup, who played Russell Hammond in that movie, and they talked about Almost Famous for a good part of the interview. And it just kind of came up that the ending of that movie is just the most perfect ending ever. And I started thinking about that movie, and man, if the ending of that movie is not the most perfect ending ever. I love Monty Python. I gave Monty Python a 10. I gave Monty Python a higher score than I gave Almost Famous. But my heart will just not let me let go of Almost Famous this soon. I'm actually moving Almost Famous on into the next round.
Yeah, I mean, I will say, I think that there's a very few select movies that honestly deserve a little bit of an asterisk next to their 10 out of 10. And I would probably put This Is Spinal Tap and Monty Python into that vein, just because they are some of the most perfect niche genre films that have ever been made. And while they might not be like 10 out of 10 in a more classical movie sense, they're perfect at what they wanted to do, right? And that's why we gave both of those movies 10 out of 10s. And so while that is true, and I just kind of set Monty Python up as not as great, I did not care for Almost Famous. It's fine. It was just a little bit convoluted. It was too long, even at the reduced version that I watched the second time. I just overall was not super impressed with it. The coming of age story didn't hit as hard for me. I thought that the director just didn't have a firm grasp on where he wanted the story to go. And so for me, I definitely would be picking Monty Python and the Holy Grail over this movie.
All right, we have not talked about the coin of destiny yet on this episode, but when we are at an impasse, we flip a coin. And whatever the coin says goes, and we move that movie on to the next round. So hanging in the balance here are two of just the most entertaining movies I've ever seen. Monty Python and the Holy Grail, Almost Famous. Brad, which one of us should be flipping the coin here?
I mean, I have my Lucky 7 distillery coin.
Oh, that is the official coin of destiny of film and whiskey. All right,
that's
so
right.
we'll go Monty Python heads, Almost Famous tails. Brad, flip the coin.
It is heads.
Of course it is. All right. I finally miss one on my bracket. Monty Python moves on to the round of 16, which means we're going down into the lower left quadrant here, where the number 4 overall seed, The Godfather, is up against the number 29 overall seed, Reservoir Dogs. If you'd asked me at the beginning of the season to put a number to where I thought Reservoir Dogs would be seated in this tournament, I would not have said number 29.
Oh, no.
But I got to tell you, man, watching it back again, I stand by it. I think it's still a good movie, but I definitely think after 30 years, it is kind of showing its age a little bit. You can see a lot of the, what's the term? Like you can see the threads kind of sticking out of the seams a little bit. Like you can tell how this was pieced together as an independent movie. It's not Tarantino's best script, and I'm okay having it down here at number 29.
Honestly, it kind of feels like when you're given free furniture as like a newlywed, and you're just like, oh, this is the coolest thing in the world. It's free. It's beautiful. It's barely been used. And then like 5 years on, you finally buy your own couch and you spend like $1,000 on it because couches are just insanely expensive. But it comes in and you're like, Oh, yeah. No,
I get it
that
now.
couch was not. I get it now. Yeah, I get it. And that's honestly like what it is to watch Pulp Fiction or Django or anything like that, and then go back and watch Reservoir Dogs.
Reservoir Dogs, the dorm room futon of Tarantino movies. All right, so are we in agreement here? The Godfather moves on?
Yeah, I think we'll talk more about what makes The Godfather great, probably next round or the round after. But for now, yeah, it's a pretty easy advancement for The Godfather.
All right, so we're moving to the number 13 seed, Titanic, up against the 20th overall seed, The Silence of the Lambs. Once again, Brad, I don't know that I expected you to be as big of a fan of Silence of the Lambs because we kind of put it off for a few seasons. I think I had it on the list earlier and you were like, listen, man, I don't do stuff like this. I don't allow myself to watch stuff like that. I think it's going to mess with me a little bit. And then you watched it and you were like, oh, this is an incredible movie. And I don't know that I was expecting you to come in swinging like that. But you really loved Silence of the Lambs.
Yeah, man, I was just blown away. I mean, Anthony Hopkins, Jodie Foster, the level of tension that they hold for such a long period of time is incredible. And I just really, really enjoyed Silence of the Lambs. It's a movie I would recommend to almost anyone, especially if you enjoy suspense horror over like blood and gore horror. I think it's a masterpiece, and I think it fits in a Hitchcockian vein. There's just a lot you can say about Silence. For me, it's definitely going to be moving on.
Yeah, and I'm in the opposite place here, where I like Silence of the Lambs. I appreciate Silence of the Lambs, but it's never really hit me on a level that makes me want to be like its advocate. Whereas Titanic is one of those movies that I feel it's very easy for me to advocate for because over the years, it really developed this reputation of just being like this, this piece of cheap entertainment. And it's anything but. And I think we did a really good job of parsing that out on the Titanic episode, talking about the filmmaking craft at play here. Behind James Cameron's massive ego, there is a really great movie lying in there. And this time through, man, it really hit me on an emotional level, like watching the destruction and these people's lives just being snuffed out. It really hit me hard. I think Titanic's a masterpiece. I think we don't talk about it enough as a truly great film, not just like a crowd pleaser and a high grossing movie. So Titanic's moving on for me. And I think that means that we have to flip a coin again, man.
Yeah, man, let's get to it.
All right, so we'll say heads is Titanic, tails, Silence of the Lambs. Brad, flip the coin of destiny.
Mr. Robert Book, your movie, Titanic, is moving on to the next round.
Where it will face off against The Godfather and be swiftly thrown into the fiery furnace.
Hey, man, you never know. I might vote for it even after I eliminated it in an earlier round.
Right, sure.
Yeah.
All right, that takes us to a true personal favorite of mine, the number 12 overall seed, Meet Me in St. Louis, up against the number 21 overall seed, Malcolm X. Now, Brad, I feel like this is just two Bob movies matched up against each other because you really liked Meet Me in St. Louis, but it's clearly not like a top 10 all-time favorite movie of yours like it is mine. And Malcolm X is a movie that I just saw this last year and am so blown away by that we just kind of threw it in on an emergency basis here. And you watched it and I think you gave it like a 7.5. Like it just didn't really strike a chord with you. So I have a feeling I know what you're moving on pretty easily here.
Yeah, Malcolm X, it was a fine movie. It just
you went from great to
me.
fine in one sentence.
I really did. I think the thing is, I want to heap praise on things. I would consider myself a pretty positive person. So like, even in that moment, my instinct was to say great. But if I'm being honest, the movie was fine. If it hadn't been packed in the middle of so many great movies that we've been watching, I might have given it a half point, a whole point higher of a score. But as it is, I just feel like we were dealing with some really heavy hitters this year. And so Malcolm X just kind of got lost in the shuffle. Whereas Meet Me in St. Louis, I liked it. was good. It was solid. It was above average. It was a fine example of a musical. I'm still a little bit confused as to your love for Meet Me in St. Louis, but man, more power to you, dude. It's a good movie. I'm glad you like it, Bob.
I think with Meet Me in St. Louis, it's like all the warm fuzzies you feel from Singing in the Rain smashed together with all the warm fuzzies you feel from It's a Wonderful Life. And it has Judy Garland, who's my favorite performer of all time. So it's just like a perfect storm of things that touch the old heartstrings here.
Yeah. Well, I'll leave this one up to you, Bob. Which one do you want to move on?
Oh, I moved on Meet Me in St. Louis. It's
all right.
This yeah, man. Listen, when Meet Me in St. Louis inevitably gets knocked out of this bracket, it's going to be crushing to me. But as of right now,
just imagine Judy Garland like walking up to the pearly gates, and then Michael like pulls the lever and she just falls into the abyss.
Oh my gosh, dude. What a dark metaphor.
I'm just letting you know that's what you created with this bracket. I wasn't the one who brought up movies going into the Inferno. That was all you, Robert. So I'm just reminding you of the hubris of your choices here.
Well, speaking of movies that are going into the Inferno, we have one more to send there before we try our first whiskey of the day. This should be a pretty easy one, man. We've got our number 5 overall seed, The Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King, going up against the number 28 overall seed, A League of Their Own. Brad, A League of Their Own might be the movie that I would most categorize as fine this whole season. It's good. Tom Hanks is great. Gina Davis, wonderful actress. It is an adequately made movie that is elevated by some good one-liners and some great performers, and it is like a 7 out of 10, but it does not hold a candle to Return of the King.
Yeah, the only comment I have on A League of Their Own is this. If anybody wants to know what sort of an old man I am that is completely unconnected to culture, I watched that whole movie without ever once realizing that Madonna was in the film. So there's your fun little nugget of the day.
All right. So Return of the King is moving on to the round of 16, which means our first 8 entries are The Two Towers, Children of Men, Schindler's List, Monty Python and the Holy Grail, The Godfather, Titanic, Meet Me in St. Louis, and Return of the King. Brad, we just ran the gamut there. I think it's time for us to try some whiskey, man. What do you say we try this barrel bourbon, batch number 26?
Bro, you've talked it up, man. And if I'm being honest, I have grown on blended whiskeys. Like, the people who know how to blend whiskeys have my eternal respect, because I think they put out some of the best products on the market. So I'm really pumped.
All right, so what we're looking at today, Brad, is batch number 26. This won double gold at San Francisco this year. It is a blend of whiskeys from Tennessee, Kentucky, and Indiana, ranging from 9 to 15 years.
MGP.
Yep.
MGP.
Yep. Ranging from 9 to 15 years in age. It's bottled at 112.64 proof.
Bob, I have a super important question for you.
Do it.
If you were a whiskey, what proof would you be barreled at?
I mean, oh man, I'd say like 104.
I'd put you at like 92. I think you're just soft and smooth,
you're a
man. No, you're just soft and smooth, bro.
I'm like, yeah, man, I'm going to be 104. And you're like, you're a 92. All right. I don't know how to take that. How about you, man? What's your proof?
It depends on the day. I think some days I'm a 128 and other days I'm an 80. I don't know, man.
I can vouch for that. That's absolutely true.
It's a mixed bag.
Well, what we're drinking today is 112 proof. Brad, like I said, this is all brown sugar, all maple on the nose for me. I'm really digging this. What are you picking up on the nose?
Yeah, I really like that maple note. It really has like a thick maple syrupy essence to it. But I'm also picking up a little bit of like an orange creamsicle. Like it's not citrusy. It just feels like an orange dreamsicle type of nose to me that I really like, Bob.
This is the best whiskey I've had in like 3 months, Brad. This is fantastic. It is really peppery
Bob,
on the palate.
Why would you say such a thing when we've been drinking all this
all the BTAC?
Amazing BTAC? How could you say such a thing? Yeah.
People, I will tell you right now, like it has incredible notes of like black pepper, lots of root beer and soda for me. It has a little bit of like a Henry McKenna type vibe too. I get a little bit of that peanut buttery, oaky finish as well. It is like everything I love in bourbon. It stays on the sweeter end. It has some nice baking spices, and there's a little bit of pepper on it. Oh my gosh, man, I am loving this.
Whoa. Bob, I don't know what you just said because I was in a blissful vision of what bourbon should be.
Oh my gosh, this is good.
Barrel bourbon. You have my hat off. This is absolutely stunningly delicious. You hit all of the right notes there on the taste. But for me, the finish is where this thing really continues to just knock me out of the park. It's got this beautiful peppery oakiness, but it doesn't overpower a little bit of vanilla that sneaks through at the very end. I get a little bit of that orange creaminess right as I'm finishing it. I am just ecstatic about this whiskey.
Yeah. It has a little bit of banana on it too. It reminds me of 1792 that way. You can make fun of me for my bananas Foster note, but it's definitely there a little bit for me.
All the Fosters.
I mean, Brad, if we were giving this scores, this would be in like the 45 range for me. This is phenomenal.
Yeah, I was going to say at the very least like a 42, 43, depending on what value is, because we haven't talked about that. But if it had a good value score, it might hit the 90 out of 100 range, between the two of us.
Here's the thing. It retails for $90, so it's expensive. But we've been drinking BTAC that did not live up to even its retail price tag. This is absolutely worth $90. Like I would have, if you lined this up next to a BTAC and said, hey, you could pay retail for one of these, I'm picking this up. Like no hesitation.
Yeah, Bob, $90 is a pretty penny. I don't think I would give this like a 9 or even an 8, but it might get like a 7, 7.5 out of 10 on value. I mean, it's really good, Bob. I don't have anything else to
That's
say.
when you know it's time to just move on. It's so good we don't have like English words to use for it. So
I just start speaking in Spanish.
All right, man, let's get back into the bracket here. We're going to go up into the upper right quadrant, starting with the number 2 overall seed, Beauty and the Beast, up against the number 31 seed, Apocalypse Now. Now, Brad, I know that Apocalypse Now just did not do it for you. I think we spent a lot of time in that episode talking about the big swings that Coppola was taking there. It's a really ambitious movie, and I really respect it for that. But again, because of the way this season was structured, I like every movie in the bracket. I understand why Apocalypse Now is this low. And to be honest with you, I don't know that I would have moved it out of the first round no matter where it was. So I'm more than okay moving Beauty and the Beast on over Apocalypse Now.
Yeah, we'll talk more about Beauty and the Beast later. Apocalypse Now, it just is a fever dream in the worst possible way. I feel like I woke up at the end of that movie sweating and shivering, and like I had just been in the jungles of Vietnam myself and needed like a lot of healthcare and respite. So yeah, not a big fan of Apocalypse Now. I will forever love the Ride of the Valkyries. There are parts of Apocalypse Now I will never forget in a good way. But yeah, it's easy to pass on.
All right, Beauty and the Beast is going on to the round of 16, and that means that we have the number 15 overall seed, Fargo, going up against the 18 overall seed, The Sting.
How far do you think it'll go, Bob?
Hey! Brad, I know that The Sting was a movie that you may not have even heard of before we did it for the podcast. We had our friend Chris Blattner come on. We were doing a mini series of Best Picture winners. The Sting is one of those movies that I think it kind of falls into that same category of like a Monty Python, where the point of that movie is to be the most crowd-pleasing possible movie it can be. And on those grounds, I don't know that I've ever seen a movie that does it better. Like even Ocean's 11, the Soderbergh one with George Clooney, that's a great movie. And I'd probably give that movie like a 9.5 or a 10 out of 10. I think The Sting is put together better than Ocean's 11 is. It's just hard for me to move it on over a movie like Fargo that has so many more layers and has more to say. And I think that like before I send The Sting off to the abyss, at least in my bracket, I want to say like there's something to be said about a movie that just wants to deliver entertainment and does it in spades. But also I'm moving Fargo on.
Yeah, I'm in the same spot as you, Bob. I was utterly blown away by how entertaining The Sting was. Every bit of it was fun and rambunctious and unique and interesting. The actors were incredibly sincere in the roles that they had. I really loved The Sting. I think it's an underwatched, undervalued movie. So go out there and watch it because I'll never be able to again.
All right. So I think that means that Fargo is moving on to the round of 16. Brad, why don't you introduce our next matchup here?
Yeah, we're jumping in with our number 10 seed, the second Toy Story, and the number 23 seed, which is Dog Day Afternoon. I will say, I would desperately want to see a crossover where one of the places the toys are running through to get to Al's Toy Barn is the bank in Dog Day Afternoon as it's being robbed. Tell me that would not just be the best thing in the world.
That would be really funny. I gotta say, man,
yeah, I could just see Rex like joining the crowd and be like, Attica, Attica.
I gotta say, I was really bummed that you were not a huge fan of Dog Day Afternoon. I still think it's a perfect movie. It's one of my favorite movies of the 1970s. I will vouch for that movie till the day I die. However, I also think Toy Story 2 is about as perfect as movies can get. And the fact that I had them both on equal footing meant that I don't know that I really came into this episode ready to advocate for Dog Day to the point where we need to do a coin flip. Like, I know you moved Toy Story 2 on, and I like Toy Story 2 the same amount as Dog Day. So, like, let's just move Toy Story 2 on. It is not worth the coin of destiny flip. They're both great movies, but Toy Story 2 is moving on for me.
Yeah. Yeah, Toy Story 2, I think it can contend for greatest sequel of all time pretty easily. And so, yeah, I think it's an easy movement as well.
All right. Well, on that note, we have the number 7 seed, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, up against the number 26 seed, Gladiator. Brad, when I made out my rankings, Gladiator was my lowest rated movie of the season. And
I was really surprised to see that.
Once again, I like all these movies. Like, I own Gladiator. It's a good movie, but it fell into that same kind of zone as Braveheart, which was decent movie, pretty bad script, passable direction. I don't understand why this won Best Picture. And I think that like it just doesn't hold up the way that I thought that it would. And that was a huge bummer for me. I think I still came out giving it a 7 or a 7.5 out of 10, but it does not hold a candle to The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly to me.
Yeah, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly is just plain and simple one of the best Westerns ever made. And Gladiator was an exercise in early 2000s slow-mo and an attempt at drama in the same vein as a Spartacus. And it hits in certain ways. There are certain parts of Gladiator that are just phenomenal. But overall, this is an easy choice. Good, the Bad, and the Ugly moves on.
Okay. Man, those were 4 pretty easy picks. And that takes us to the bottom right quadrant where we have the number 3 overall seed, The Matrix, going up against the number 30 seed, Les Miserables. Now, once again, talk about 2 movies that I would like to see mashed up somehow.
Yes.
If we could just get Morpheus to sing I Dreamed a Dream, then everything would be good. Like I would die a happy man.
Who would sing Look Down at the very start? Would it be Neo trying to get Morpheus to look at him?
I was going to say that's an Agent Smith song.
Oh, dude.
Look down, Mr. Anderson.
Hugo Weaving in the interrogation room singing Look Down.
Is there any need for discussion here?
No, Matrix.
The Matrix
is
moving on. All right.
Matrix might be the best sci-fi movie ever created.
Yeah, it's up there.
Like so yeah, that's a pretty obvious one.
Now, here's one that I was not expecting, and that is There Will Be Blood, the number 14 overall seed, up against...
No, I believe it's There Will Be Blood.
Right there. Where will be blood? There will be blood.
There will be blood.
Up against the number 19 overall seed, Network. Now, once again, Network, a movie Brad was not even familiar with before we recorded it for the podcast, a movie that he really liked, a movie that I really love. There Will Be Blood, a movie that I have been wrestling with for like 15 years now. And Brad, you are joining me in that wrestling, but you came away from it basically saying, hey, I'm wrestling with this movie, but it is undeniably great. And I think my wrestling with the movie is like, if I can't reconcile this, I can't consider it great, which is a flaw with me and not the movie. But once again, There Will Be Blood is one of those movies that just never really hit me on like a gut level. And I really struggled with this one. Brad, I'm going to assume you moved There Will Be Blood on to the next round.
Bob, do you want to know something crazy?
What's that?
You and I both gave both of these movies a 9 out of 10.
Yeah.
So literally, we both gave Network a 9, and we both gave There Will Be Blood a 9. I don't know if there's ever been a more perfect like synchronicity in the bracket ever. Like the only thing that would have made this better if it was like the number 16 and number 17 seed.
Yeah, right. It's close enough.
Yeah, it honestly is. Yeah, I did move There Will Be Blood on. And honestly, the argument that I kind of used for myself was that I feel like it's a more important movie. Mm-hmm. But even that's starting to fall apart as I think about it. Because like, I think Network is a vastly important movie. So I don't know, man. It's honestly a coin flip for me, which I don't know. Is it a coin flip for you? Do you feel like it's very obvious that Network should move on over Blood?
I think if I was just going on my own personal gut feeling, I'd probably put Network to the next round just because I like it better. But knowing how much you liked it, knowing how important it is, and I think that as time goes by, There Will Be Blood will continue to be a milestone movie in a way that Network just no longer is. So I'm okay moving it on to the next round. I think we should move There Will Be Blood on to the next round. I hate to cast off Network so early. And I really hope that if you're looking for something to watch, that you'll consider going and watching Network before it leaves all of the streaming platforms as it enters the fiery abyss.
Yeah, if you didn't know, we actually have contracts with all of the different major streaming services, and they abide firmly by the bracket. So you better get your hands on this film pretty soon.
All right, Brad, our last two matchups here in the round of 32 are Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, the 11 seed, up against WALL-E, the 22 seed. This was not hard for me. I think Half-Blood Prince is a way better movie than it will ever get credit for. I think WALL-E is an important movie that is a little bit overhyped, and it has an inflated stature that it doesn't necessarily deserve. Half-Blood Prince is the better movie, in my opinion.
Yeah, let's move Half-Blood on, man. I'm with you there.
All right, and that brings us to one that I think will be the easiest one for Brad to make. The number 6 overall seed, The Apartment, up against...
The Apartment!
Yeah, it is.
It's better. All About Eve sucks.
Up against All About Eve, which is the 27 seed. I still think All About Eve is a great movie. It's probably still in my top 100. The Apartment is better. The Apartment is one of my favorite movies of all time. I have no qualms moving The Apartment into the round of 16, which means here's our last 8 going into that round. Beauty and the Beast, Fargo, Toy Story 2, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, The Matrix, There Will Be Blood, Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, and The Apartment. Brad, let's take a breather. Let's try Barrel Rye. What do you say?
Let's get to it.
All right, so now we're trying Barrel Rye. Now, they're newer to the rye game than they are to bourbon. Obviously, we just tried batch 26 of the bourbon. This is only batch 3 of the rye. The age,
Bob, I just had an image of Robert Jones, James Earl Jones' father in The Sting, being like, so you're new to the rye game, son.
And they are, but apparently they're still knocking it out of the park because these things are winning gold medals everywhere. This thing is coming in at 116.7 proof. It's a blend of ryes from 4 to 14 years old. Brad, I don't want to say much more about it. Let's just dive right in. You're a rye drinker. Is this hitting your rye sweet spot?
This is everything I want out of a rye and then some. For me, it almost reminds me a bit of like if you took, I don't know, it feels like if you blended like the Sexton with a really nice sharp rye, and you just get these really beautiful, bright, fruity notes that you kind of get on Irish whiskeys mixed with a nice punch of that rye spicy boldness. I am loving the nose on this.
Do you know, like when you pour a glass of soda and you drop an ice cube in it and like everything bubbles up for a second and then it kind of fizzes out again? I feel like that's the experience of drinking this rye. Like it hits your tongue, and you're right, it has that very smooth, almost Irish whiskey kind of mouthfeel. Like the consistency of it is very similar to an Irish whiskey. The mid palate though, Brad, it opened back up into the most beautiful, sweet bourbony notes. Like it's really caramel heavy. And then it kind of relaxes back into the back of your palate, and it hits you with a bunch of rye grain and like really raw kind of rye spice. And that's how it finishes out. It is incredibly smooth at 116 proof. This might be the best rye we've had all season on the podcast, Brad.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I would put the Old Forester rye up there, but this is pretty daggone close. Bob, superlatives are failing me here because Barrel Bourbon is knocking it out of the park with their bourbon and their rye so far.
Yeah, this rye retails for $80, so a little bit less than the bourbon. And I think it is every bit as worth it as that bourbon was. Like, again, if you're going to pay a lot of money for a whiskey, you want to know that it is well put together. And both of these absolutely are.
Well, as well put together as these whiskeys have been, Bob, I think our bracket this year is even better. So how about we get back into the round of 16 and throw some of your favorite movies into the fiery furnace?
My favorite activity. All right, Brad, kicking off the round of 16 here. We've got the number 1 seed, The Two Towers, up against the number 16 seed, Children of Men. I know what's moving on here because I have it moving on too. I want to play devil's advocate, or I want you to play devil's advocate. Give me a 15-second defense for why Children of Men could conceivably move on if we wanted it to.
Well, I think that Bob could have become suddenly a lightweight, and these whiskeys have already gone to his head, and he made a ridiculous decision, like choosing Children of Men over The Two Towers, and the coin of destiny gets flipped, and somehow the fates get things wrong and move the two towers into the fiery abyss. That's the only situation.
All right, let me ask you this way then. How big of a gap do you think there is in quality between The Two Towers and Children of Men?
I think you're moving from something that is going to be one of the best movies of all time and something that will naturally move into the fiery abyss just as time moves on.
All right. Wow. That is really depressing. But in the spirit of Children of Men, I guess it really fits in. So Children of Men is going to get thrown to the furnace. Guys, I do want to say one of my favorite movies of the 21st century. If you have not seen it, Children of Men is absolutely worth the watch. Thought-provoking.
Oh, it's a banger, dude.
It's a great movie.
Yeah.
But Two Towers is moving on, and that means that we are moving down to Schindler's List, the number 9 seed, up against Almost Famous, the 25 seed. Brad, I'm just going to do it now and say
Whoa,
I put...
Whoa.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Robert.
Sorry.
Did you seem to forget? I've never heard of that movie you mentioned before.
I'm sorry. I'm looking at my bracket. All right. Tried to sneak one by you there.
That movie doesn't exist.
I should just put the old Windows error sound like over when I'm trying to say Almost Famous.
That would be perfect.
All right, so Schindler's List, the number 9 seed, going up against, my apologies, the number 8 seed, Monty Python and the Holy Grail. Brad, my hot take here was that I was going to put Almost Famous on over Schindler's List and cause absolute havoc in our bracket. But knowing now that it's Monty Python, I would feel like a bad person if I put Monty Python over Schindler's List. So Schindler's List is moving on.
Yep. Nothing like getting people on morality to move movies on. Yeah, dude, Schindler's List is it's an easy choice for me. That's what my bracket dictated anyways. So here we are. Schindler's List is moving on.
All right, so that means we are looking at The Godfather, the number 4 seed, up against the number 13 seed, Titanic. Once again, I love Titanic, and I actually think this was a closer matchup than I expected it to be when I kind of thought about the two of them up against each other. But there is no denying The Godfather. Like, it's The Godfather. Like, what else are you going to do? And so Titanic, well, let me ask you this, Brad. Did you move The Godfather on?
Si, senor.
Yeah, I thought so.
Yeah, Godfather's an easy choice here. For me, it was going to move past Silence anyways. There's a reason people think of The Godfather as possibly one of the greatest movies of all time. There is so much to like in this movie. Honestly, the more I look back on The Godfather, the more I feel like it's just one of the smoothest movies ever made. Like the way he moves you from character to character, from scene to scene, from idea to idea, he just does it in such a beautiful way. I really do love The Godfather. I will say I only gave it a 9 out of 10. It's not for me a perfect movie, but it is better than Silence of the Lambs.
All right, so Titanic has been plucked from its ice bath and thrown into the fiery furnace. It's been a rough day for the passengers of the Titanic, but The Godfather is moving on.
Those are real people, Bob.
I'm telling you, man, it's been a rough day. So we've got the number 12 seed, Meet Me in St. Louis, going up against the number 5 overall seed, The Return of the King. This is where I get to be that guy. I moved Meet Me in St. Louis on. It's near and dear to my heart. Two Towers is better than Return of the King. I expect Two Towers to go further in this bracket. And so for me, this was a no-brainer. I assume it was also a no-brainer for you, but in the complete opposite direction.
Yeah, there's a reason I gave The Fellowship of the Ring a 10 out of 10. The Two Towers a 10 out of 10. The Return of the King a 10 out of 10. It is my favorite movie series of all time. And while I agree with you that The Return of the King is the worst of the three, for me, it is minor variations in a fantastic sense of perfection. So yeah, Return of the King is an easy thing to move on. For me, Meet Me in St. Louis is a above average musical that just didn't really stick with me a ton. I feel like I've seen a lot of other ones just like it. And so it's easy to bop off, just boop it on down into the fiery furnace.
All right, so Tootie can dig up all of her dead dolls and then take them down to the pits of Sheol.
That's right, dude.
We need to flip a coin because I'm sticking with this, man. Meet Me in St. Louis is a better movie than Return of the King, and it deserves to move on. So, Brad, you're going to flip a coin, and you're going to disappoint me because I know how you operate. But Meet Me in St. Louis is going to be heads. Return of the King is going to be tails. Brad, flip the coin of destiny.
See, Bob, first off, I don't like that you just insinuated that I cheat.
I didn't. I know. I just think that the way that it usually goes when you flip the coin is that I do not win.
That's not true. I think we could go back in the record book and see that it's a pretty even distribution.
Well, I would assume that we would be regressing to the mean here, but it does not seem that way to me.
Yeah, no, because Return of the King is moving on.
All right. Brad, Meet Me in St. Louis went to the championship for me.
Really?
That's how much I love that movie. Yeah.
Oh, man.
Like, what you feel about Secondhand Lions, I feel about Meet Me in St. Louis.
Yeah, I get that.
You know what I'm saying?
Dude.
Like, I know it's not perfect, and I think it's more close to perfect than Secondhand Lions is, but like, I just... It beat The Godfather for me. I was like, if I had to choose between dropping The Godfather off the side of the cliff and dropping this one, I'm keeping Meet Me in St. Louis.
Yeah. Dude, but honestly, though, that is the beautiful thing about movies, is that you literally can't choose a perfect movie. Like, humans literally can't come to a place where they just all unanimously agree, yes, movie X is the most perfect movie of all time. And the reason is exactly what you're saying here. We just have weird, intangible factors that influence us as we decide what our top 3 favorite movies are, our top 10. And that's what makes humanity beautiful. So I'm with you, man. I love that you love Meet Me in St. Louis.
All right, man. Well, we have one more whiskey to drink here, and that is the Barrel Dovetail. Now, again, this won gold at San Francisco World Spirits Competition. So what we have here is a really unique blend of whiskeys. We've got 10-year-old whiskey that was distilled at MGP, and then it was finished in Cabernet barrels, blended with 11-year-old bourbon that was distilled in Tennessee, and they split that bourbon up, and they finished half of it in rum casks, and then the other half of it in port. So we've got rum, port, and Cabernet all really kind of married together here. This is a 122 proof whiskey. Brad, I'm pouring it out right now, so I'm just going to stick my nose in this thing while you talk about it. What do you think?
Bob, this is one of the most uniquely sweet whiskeys I have ever nosed. Like, you get that cane sugar from the rum, you get a little bit of that dry red cab nose to it, and yet you still get some of those classic bourbon notes. Like all those years in the, bourbon barrels, you get some nice caramel, you get some brown sugar, you get some vanilla that I'm just, God bless it, dude. Why have I not heard of Barrel before?
I don't know, man, because they're absolutely killing it. I will say this has just a weird, there's one weird note on this, and I can't quite place it yet, but it's nice and herbal. There's lots of wine characteristics going on here. And then there's just this one really off note that I keep getting. I'm trying to place it.
It's a funk?
It's not quite a funk. It's savory. It almost smells like meat a little bit, which is something that I'm not used to smelling on whiskeys. So I'm going to give it a taste, and I hope that doesn't carry through. But that would be the first ding I have against any of these 3 whiskeys all day. So I'm going to give it a sip. Brad, have you tasted it already?
Whew. Robert, Bruce Book, that is how you finish a whiskey.
Wow. This is really spicy.
Yeah, it is so incredibly spicy. I was not expecting that at all. But for me, you're getting a lot of really nice notes mixed with really surprising pepper and baking spices. I don't know what to do with this. It is complex. It is interesting. It's not what I expected, and I love it.
This is weird, but in a good way. It doesn't taste like bourbon. It doesn't taste like rye. If I had to say it was one of the two, I would say it tastes more like rye than bourbon, but it kind of tastes more like scotch than either one of them because of that port, I think, really coming through here. And I know obviously scotches tend to be more sherry than port, but this is a finish that I'm not used to on bourbon. And it has a really herbal undertone to it. It's not very sweet. And yet at the same time, it is really sweet. There's this weird note of marshmallow fluff I keep getting on this too.
Yeah.
Man,
yeah, dude.
What a unique whiskey. And I say that in a way that I'm not trying to take away from it at all. I don't know what to make of this. Really good, but it's messing with my mind a little bit.
Bob, I think that in between season 4 and 5, I'm going to go to some sort of anger management rehab facility. I'm going to take some time off. I'm going to refocus, find my zen. But until then, how in the freaking world is the whiskey community losing their damn minds over BTAC when you have some of the best damn whiskey I've ever had in my life in these freaking barrels? I just don't get it, Bob. Is it the mystique? Is it this mythical aura that Buffalo Trace used to be something? It's not anymore, guys. Stop buying Buffalo Trace. Buy stuff like Barrel. They are making better whiskey. Period. That's all that matters. That's all that you need to know. I will atone for my anger at some point in my life, but for now, I've spent most of season 4 just moaning and complaining and being frustrated with BTAC. So I figured I might as well finish it out now and say, we're drinking some of the best freaking whiskey that we've had on this podcast. So just stop it. Stop buying BTAC.
Stop chasing BTAC. Try to find some barrel. Like, I'm telling you, we had the bourbon, we had the rye, we had the finished, all incredible, all worth the money. Go find barrel bourbon and blow up Instagram with pictures of that instead of BTAC.
I would say barrel. If you want to use like a sound clip, here you go. Barrel bourbon is 1,000,000 times better than anything you could get on the BTAC line. Boom.
And there with that, Brad, here's our final few matchups. We've got Beauty and the Beast, the number 2 seed, up against Fargo, the 15 seed. I think people may have underestimated us when we said that we both think Beauty and the Beast is a perfect movie and maybe the best movie to ever come out of the Walt Disney Studios. I'm kind of looking at our bracket and I'm thinking, I'm going to be surprised if Beauty and the Beast doesn't at least make the championship. Like, this is my pick at this point. I think this one's really going to do some damage, and it's going to knock out a lot of movies. I moved Beauty and the Beast on really easily here.
Yeah, so did I. And Bob, it's so funny that you said that because I was literally thinking the exact same thing. Like, I think I wanted to give voice to our listeners that I would imagine are thinking to themselves, how the heck are you moving a Disney princess movie from the 90s over Fargo, this dark, nihilistic classic from the Coen brothers? And the honest answer is this. I genuinely think that Beauty and the Beast is a masterpiece of a film. So yeah, it's easy to move on for me too, Bob.
Now, I'm curious to see where you fall on our next matchup, which is the number 10 seed, Toy Story 2, up against the 7 seed, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. I don't know if I was influenced by the fact that these are like right next to each other, that we have this animated movie in Toy Story 2 so close in proximity to Beauty and the Beast. But when it came to Toy Story 2 and The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, it's one of those cases, again, where I think I had these movies ranked pretty much right next to each other. They're both 10s out of 10 for me. But if Beauty is going to be the standard bearer, I think Toy Story 2 is probably just a hair underneath that for me. And so I actually chose to move The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly on to the next round.
I also chose to move The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly on.
Wow. Man, we are drama-free today.
Yeah, I was going to say, other than... crap, I don't even remember what the name of the movie was. Other than that one you seemed to get upset about earlier, I think this has been a pretty... I don't know. I said it to you before we started the podcast. It was one of the hardest list of 32 to rank order, but weirdly, it was one of the easiest brackets to fill out for me. Like, to me, it just felt like there was very obvious choices at every turn.
Well, let's see if that trend continues, because we have the number 3 seed, The Matrix, up against There Will Be Blood, the number 14 seed. Brad, I just think The Matrix ultimately is the better movie here. And I think that it changed cinema in a way that There Will Be Blood has not done, which is not a ding against There Will Be Blood. I think There Will Be Blood is definitely the more artistic movie. It's probably the one that cinephiles like better, but I moved on The Matrix here.
Yeah, so did I. The more I watch The Matrix, the more I like it. And there's a lot of movies where that can't be said for. Like, you hit a certain point and you're like, I just don't see it anymore. With The Matrix, every single time I watch it, I get sucked in more and more. I moved it on past There Will Be Blood. Not super easily, but with relative ease.
That means we have one more matchup in our round of 16. It's the 11 seed, Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, up against the 6 seed, The Apartment. Now, once again, Brad, The Apartment is one of those movies that I feel like people who really like classic movies have seen The Apartment. They've told their friends about The Apartment. It's a well-known movie, but only in certain groups. And I feel like it really needs to be more widely spread than that. It won Best Picture. It's got one of my favorite actors of all time, Jack Lemmon, in the lead role. It's a Billy Wilder movie. It's one of my favorite movies ever, and it is for a reason, because I think it's a perfect movie. And it kind of really easily skated by Half-Blood Prince for me.
Yeah, Bob, The Apartment is just a brilliant film because I think it takes Jack Lemmon to a place that not a lot of movies have, which is there's so much emotional depth in the way that he cares for Shirley MacLaine in this movie. I just really, really love what he did there. But if I had to put one of these movies on, I think I would put the Half-Blood
No,
Prince.
don't do this to me, man. Don't do that. You already took away Meet Me in St. Louis.
Bob, I think
I am hurt.
I think that the way what's his name? David
Yates,
thank you.
I don't even want to correct you. I'm so hurt right now.
I think that the way David Yates portrays relationships in The Half-Blood Prince is one of the most beautifully artistic things you get, not just in the Harry Potter franchise, but really in a lot of modern cinema. I just don't think that many people capture friendship the way that Yates does in that movie, and that's really what pushed it over the top for me. So yeah, I actually did choose Half-Blood, although I will say I think that Half-Blood and Apartment was the hardest decision I had to make in the entire bracket.
I gotta say, man, I only listened to like half of what you were saying because I'm just so bummed right now. Like, I really hope that the Lord smiles upon me for one brief moment and helps me move the Apartment on here. And I don't know if it's just because I'm 3 barrel-proof whiskeys in now, but like, man, this is not looking good for me.
Which one do you want to be heads?
Well, we'll do it the way that we've been doing it, which is the first one that comes up in the matchup is heads. So Half-Blood Prince is heads, Apartment is tails. You have control of all of my emotions, Brad. Flip that coin.
Bob, I am a slave to being honest. And the Apartment is moving on to the fiery inferno.
Oh, why would you say it like that? Why would you do that? Like, you gave me hope until the last second.
Bob, I'm an entertainer. I am here to entertain.
Who did you entertain with that?
Me. 100% me.
God, I hate you so much. Oh my gosh. I put a check mark next to the Apartment before you. God, I hate you. All right.
Well, guys, that has been another bracket episode ending in
with
the
a crushing
place.
blow to my ego. All right, so,
guys,
wait. Before we wrap up, let's read out the list of 8 here, Brad, because this is our final 8. And I will say, while most of these picks in this episode were pretty easy to move on, I feel like once we get to the round of 8 here, Brad, we are going to have to make some really difficult decisions because our list of 8 is The Two Towers, Schindler's List, The Godfather, The Return of the King, Beauty and the Beast, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, The Matrix, and Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince. Like, that's a murderer's row right there.
Yeah, it is a spectacular list of 8 movies. And like I said, I think that this might be one of our best seasons yet as far as quality of movies from top to bottom.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. All right, so that means we will see you next week when we go through the round of 8, the round of 4, and we crown our champion. But until then, I'm Bob Book.
I'm Brad G.
And we'll see you next time.